Okay, had several questions again with regard to the Rephaim eruptions. Okay, now I'm going to go through this quickly, and we'll try to get dispense with some of these various things so we can get to the new material this second hour and have it all on the tapes. But the word Rephaim is the umbrella term for all the beings I'm talking about, because it refers to the genetic manipulation or stitching together of these races of people, this category of being, if you will. So that's why we call them Rephaim eruptions. They were the things that Satan caused in an attempt, number one, to corrupt the race so that Christ could not save the human race, or to keep Israel from the land. So then we talked about the fact that we can identify each group because of their fathers. One group has angelic fathers. Now, the thing about this is that when we talk about an animal having no soul, you have to remember that the group of animals we're talking about here, first of all, have a third angelic soul, a third of a human soul, and then a third of an animal soul. And they are different because the genes in the angels, as they became man, were different. Normal men cannot conceive with animals. But these, evidently from the scripture, the seed was so powerful it could conceive with animals and bring forth another class of being. So all of them are Rephaim. One group has angelic fathers, the other has human fathers. Now the important thing about this side is they did not cohabit with animals. It went as far as simply genetically manipulating a large race of human beings. But they did not cohabit with the animals. Therefore, on the one side, Jesus Christ did not die for animals nor angels, only men. So, on this first category, Jesus did not die for them. The second category, however, they could have been saved because they're just like us, except bigger. They pulled into McDonald's and said, supersize it. Okay? So let's hurry through this. Abaddon is the name of the leader of the clan. Anak, the leader of the second category. All of the others came from these two. And then as they had sons, or the other angels, as far as the second category is concerned, the rest of these beings came into existence through them. That's why we call this side hybrids and this side inbred. Because on the second category, they still were all humans. They just selected certain ones for the breeding process. On the other side, it was angels, a different type of flesh, if you will, with humans, with animals. And all three are different types, not normally used for reproduction, sex relations, and so forth. Now, in Genesis chapter 6, verse number 4, it says, "There were giants in those days, after the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bare children to them." Now, the word giant is the Hebrew Nephal, and Nephalim means the fallen ones. Now, all the giants here, Nephalim, are also Rephaim. As a matter of fact, they're Rephaim first, because they're stitched together. But they became very large individuals and a lower class humanity than what God intended. That's why he calls them fallen. They've come short of the standard that God originally intended. Now, if you'll come over to Numbers chapter 13 and verse 33. On this side, it says in verse 33, We saw there the giants, which come of the giants. Now, this group too formed giants, and this is the Hebrew word Nephilim. So, both groups are Rephaim, and both groups formed Nephilim. So you have to keep that in mind. Now, one of the reasons before, now you'll remember, before I would always say Rephaim is the umbrella term, and the Nephilim fit in under that. One of the reasons that we call the subsequent creations from the Nephilim with the animals, and let's bring them up here. It included the animals, it did not include the animals here, is because the scripture does not call these animal creations Nephilim. Though I guess technically they're part of it. But we have therefore just referred back to their generic name, Rephaim, because specifically the giants are called Nephilim. Because it is angel and humanity short of what God intended. Over here, it is humanity plus humanity, but it's short of what God intended. What should I say? Taller than what God intended. It's more than what God intended on the one side. But the one side could be redeemed. The second category, minus the animals, minus the angels, were still humans. And therefore, Jesus Christ represented them on the cross. They could be saved. But the first category of being here, the angels, humans, then plus the animals, cannot be saved. He did not die for the animals. He did not die for the angels. And so therefore, this side cannot be saved. Now that has some results in theology. Now the results we'll see about here in a minute. But on the one hand, the flood killed off all the first category. The reason being, God could not let any of the first category live. On the other hand, they were killed by Israel, but probably were not totally annihilated. And the reason we say that is because Goliath was of the giants, and he had brothers. There were some that probably escaped. And we call them various names in the evolutionist camp. We don't, but that's what the evolutionists call them. We know where they came from. Anak, that's who they are. But now, since the flood, this first group has souls that roam the earth. Where did these demons come from? Well, number one, they're not fallen angels. They are from fallen angels. They have the seed of fallen angels, plus humanity, and then some of them plus the animals. So when God killed off their bodies, the interesting thing about this is that He did not put their souls in hell. He allows their souls to roam free. And we know that from the documentation we have of demons, and they're always looking for a body to possess. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, okay, they're looking for a body. Where are there disembodied spirits that are different from all other creations, Well, here, the Rephaim, who had angels and humans, form Nephilim. The Nephilim then had relations with other humans, with other Nephilim, and with the animals, and it gets to be a mongrelized mess. But the point here, God killed all of them off, and their bodies will not be resurrected. They have there's no redemption for their bodies. There is no redemption for their souls. Jesus Christ did not represent them on the cross of Calvary. They are spirits roaming that are unsaved. Okay, now, on the other hand, when these people were killed, they went to hell, because they're still just human beings, just a different type. So up here we put this group has no resurrection. So if you'll turn with me now to Job. We'll go quickly through this because we want to get to our new material. Job chapter 26. And verses 4 and 5. To whom hast thou uttered words, and whose spirit came from thee? Dead things. Now see, here is where you get the term Rapha, or the Rephaim. All right? Sometimes it is transliterated from the Hebrew into the English Rephaim. We saw that this morning, the valley of the Rephaim. But mainly it is translated dead or deceased. So when it says dead things, it literally is the Rephaim are formed from under the waters and the inhabitants thereof. All right? Ask the question. Who was killed by the flood? The first category of the Rephaim that we're talking about. They were all killed by the flood. Their bodies were destroyed, but their souls were not. That's why it calls it a birth. It's as though they twisted or wiggled out of their body is the picture, the concept that is given here. Just as though they were given birth, but their body is decomposed and there's no memory of it, but their spirits now roam, but they have no resurrection. Let's go to Psalms 88. Psalms 88. Now here are two Hebrew words that are translated into the English dead. They're used to characterize this group we're talking about. Wilt thou show wonders to the muth, the dead, physically dead? Shall the dead, the Nephilim, arise and praise thee? Rhetorical question, the answer of which is no. The Nephilim shall not arise. They are physically dead, and they're going to stay dead physically forever. Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah chapter 26 and 2 verses there. Again, we have the two Hebrew words, muth and Rephaim, translated dead and deceased. Verse 14, they are dead. Isaiah 26:14. They shall not live. They are Rephaim, deceased. They shall not rise. Therefore you have visited them in the flood, and destroyed them in the flood, and made all their memory to perish in the flood. Now, we still have Rephaim bodies on the earth, but according to this, it is the second category of Rephaim that have been found by archaeologists and anthropologists and so forth, and have said, well, look, it looks human. It's somewhere between a human and an ape, and look at this skull and so forth. Look at the skeleton. Yes, it's the Rephaim, but not the first category. God erased that memory. It's the second category. They're still Rephaim and they're still Nephilim, but they're a different kind. That's why we're contrasting the two. So we will understand. Some are purely human, some are not. All right, verse number 19. Thy dead men shall live together. With my dead body they shall arise. Over my dead body. Well, no, with my dead body. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, the dew of the herbs and so forth. But the earth is going to cast out the dead. It is Rephaim. The earth's not going to give a physical substance to enshroud, enwrap, to embody, to make incarnate. The Rephaim, it's not going to do it except in a secondary sense, and we'll see that here in just a little bit. Okay? On the other hand, this group will be resurrected. And did I make a mistake? Okay. There's another thing. This side, and this side alone, became demons. Now, let's move on. We're going to move quickly through this. But it's important that we get all of this together. We're going to the center of the earth here, as it was before Christ evacuated it. We're going to put these things up, and we're going to go, first of all, to Deuteronomy chapter 14. Then we're going to go to Mark chapter 5. Deuteronomy chapter 14. Verse 6, every beast that parts the hoof and cleaves the cleft into two claws, and chews the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, ye shall not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as camel and hare and coney. For they chew the cud, but don't divide the hoof. They're unclean. Or the swine, because it divides the hoof, yet chews not the cud. It is unclean to you. You shall not eat of their flesh. All right? Come with me then to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And we'll make a quick mention of these things because of our time, and we want to get moving here. Jesus came across to Gadara, verse number 2, so Mark 5:2. There met a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit. His dwelling was among the tombs. We've made mention of the fact before that they're in the tombs because dead bodies are there and they want to possess a body. No man could bind them, not with chains. They were fierce and strong and so forth. Night and day, verse 5, he was in the tombs crying. And also verse 5 says he was in the mountains. Why did these spirits drive him to the tombs and to the mountains? Because the flood covered the mountains and they had nowhere else to go. They lost their bodies in the mountains, in the tops of the mountains. And they feel safer up there because of the flood. So, verse number 9, Jesus asked him his name. He said, my name is Legion, singular, for we are many. Legion is 6,000 demons plus the devil here. And so they asked him not to send them out of the country. We're going to look at that here in a minute in Luke. Not to send them out of the country, verse 10, but there was a herd of swine. All the devils besought him, saying, send us to the swine, enter into them. Jesus gave them leave. The unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine. The herd ran violently down a steep place and got choked in the sea. There were about 2,000 of them. So it says in verse 15, they came to Jesus and to see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting clothed in his right mind. All right, let's go to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. And verse number 28. A guy saw Jesus, came out with a loud voice. He said, I beseech thee, torment me not. In the book of Matthew, it says, are you come to torment us before the time? There is a place and time where they are going to be tormented. The time is the goat judgment, and the place is the abyss. Now, how do we know that? He said, my name is Legion, verse number 30. Many devils were entered into him. They besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep. Now this time it's not the country, but it's the Greek word abyss, into the deep, into the bottomless pit, where their fathers are. Abaddon came out of the bottomless pit, where the devil is going to be chained and so forth. So they did not want to be judged before the time. They did not want to be disembodied. They knew that they were going to be cast out, but they asked to be cast into swine. Now Jesus Christ could legitimately do this. Why? Well, in the heart of the earth, you'll note, and I've got this drawn here as the way that it was. It's still in existence, by the way, with the great gulf, the torments, and paradise. It's just that paradise is evacuated. All right. Tartarus is still there, the bottomless pit where their fathers are, the angelic fathers, and unbelievers are still there. We don't want to go to the abyss. Okay, where do you want to go? Send us to the swine. Now you remember that if the animal chewed the cud and made a division with his hoof, that was a clean animal. The reason being, all of these things are symbolic, first of all, of what we do. Those of us who have believed the Lord Jesus Christ have had a humble bowing toward the earth. And that is seen when the cattle are lowing. They come down, they bow their head, they get the grass, and they pick it up. Grass is indicative of grace. It is God's universal common provision for these animals. So they eat of grace. They chew the cud. They mull it over. They depend upon the grass or the grace of God. And not only that, they make a distinction. And if you'll note, if you'll turn the hoof over like this, you will see that there is a distinction between believers and unbelievers, and there is a cleft there, a great gulf fixed between the two. So God said, if they make a distinction in their hoof, which is what the pig does, but he doesn't chew the cud, it means that he rejects the grace of God, just like all unbelievers, and he makes the distinction, I'm an unbeliever. I refuse the grace of God. I'm not going to partake of God's provision for me. And so the demons were cast into the swine, and the swine went down there, and guess what happened to them? Into the sea, and I always call that deja vu, because that's where they lost their body in the first place, with the flood, and they lost their body again. Okay. Now, at the point of the sheep and goat judgment, let's go to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. And verse number 7. Now, at the point of the sheep-goat judgment, you have 4 body types that are going to be represented there. First of all, the fallen angels. And verse number 7 says that originally, he made his angels spirits and his ministers a flame of fire. So the first type, they have a natural spirit body. And these are going to be placed into the lake of fire. Now, don't ask me how the flames can hurt a spirit body. I can't tell you exactly. I have my suspicions, and we'll go into it sometime, but I'm not ready to say just yet. However, the lake of fire was made for the devil and his angels. And so this is before the second type of fallen angels. The second type was led by what man? What man? What angel? Abaddon. And he assumed a human body. Let's go to 1 Peter. Chapter 3, verse 19, by which he went and preached, this is, he went to the center of the earth, Christ, unto the spirits in prison. Now, these are the angels that assumed a human body. They became man-like. When did this happen? When sometimes they were disobedient, or the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was preparing. So that identifies this group of angels. And here's the thing, chapter 2 of 2 Peter. And it says that God spared not the angels that sinned. That's this group. It's the second category of fallen angel. God didn't spare the first category, but he's not judged them yet. He did judge the second category, and he sent them down to hell, but it's the Greek word Tartarus. It's not Hades. He sent them down to hell, delivering them to chains of darkness to be reserved to judgment. All right? Let's look at the book of Jude. One more reference here. And it's verse number 6. The angels which kept not their first estate. Now there is the key. They were spirit beings who became corporeal. They took on human flesh and bodies. They left their own habitation, never to go back again. They are spirits who assumed human flesh, and they can't go back into it. That's why they were all caught here by the flood, and God took them, and He had a special judgment for them. He cast them down to hell, or to Tartarus. He hath reserved an everlasting change under darkness to the judgment of the great day. Now again, we're going to see there are two great day judgments where their judgments are going to transpire. Okay, the third type of body is the group that doesn't have a body. Remember, Rephaim category 1 has absolutely no resurrection. What does that mean? It means they don't have a body. Well, how are they going to be embodied to be cast into hell? They are going to possess the bodies of those men. Now, it doesn't mean that the soul of the man is going to be evicted or ejected. They're going to share that body so that their fathers became man-like, and they're going to become like men. They're going to assume a human body in one fashion, and they're going to acquire a human body in another fashion. And then we're going to have the regular men represented here as we turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25 and verse number 32. Before Christ, before His great white throne, but this great white throne, verse number 31, is before the great white throne. This is the sheep and goat judgment. He is still on a throne. It is glorious. It still represents His righteousness. But one of His throne judgments, called the sheep and goat judgment, is before the millennial kingdom. The other great white throne judgment is after the millennial kingdom. But the point we're making here is, and the fourth type is mankind. Before Him shall be gathered all nations, literally all nations of men, and separate them as the sheep from the goats. So, at this point, we have fallen angels with their natural spirit bodies. We have the second group of fallen angels with their assumed human bodies. We have the third type of being, the Rephaim. But now, let me ask you a question. Which category of Rephaim has no resurrection? Category 1 or Category 2? Category 1. Category 2 has a resurrection. They are not represented here in this judgment. And then mankind in their natural human bodies. But what is different about this group of mankind as opposed to other unbelievers who are going to the lake of fire? Number one, they have never physically died. They've come through the tribulation period. They are goats. They've never physically died. And on their body is the mark of the beast. That's what makes them distinct. So let's bring up our last, okay, there's the 1,000-year kingdom. There is the judgment of the sheep and the goats. It happens prior to the 1,000 years. So all four of the bodies, or lack thereof, are going to be cast into the lake of fire at this time. I'll show you what I mean. There's another judgment. It's called the Great White Throne. That happens afterward. Now, all of these beings are going to all end up in the lake of fire, but some before the time and some after. The land, the world, has to be cleansed of unclean spirits before the kingdom can come. So the unclean spirits have to be judged at this point. By the way, in the middle part of the tribulation period, who is cast out of heaven? The devil and his angels. They're on earth. God clipped their wings. So they are judged here, except for the devil. He's going to wait for the great white throne. You have to keep all of these categories in mind. Well, let's bring them up then. Okay? The first type of fallen angels, since they are cast out in the midst of the tribulation period, and they are represented here in the sheep and goat judgment. They are on the earth, and they are cast into the lake of fire at this time. There are no fallen angels that are allowed to roam free anywhere. They are judged in their natural spirit body. Secondly, the fallen angels that have assumed human bodies. The judgment of the great day is referred to as the judgment here before the kingdom starts. They are going to be judged. So their bodies will be taken from Tartarus, transferred to the lake of fire, from a state penitentiary to a federal one, as it were, if you want to try to compare what types of places, incarcerations, and so forth that they had. All right? Now, those that are the third type that have no human body now have an acquired human body. Why? Because they possess the men with the mark of the beast. And then the fourth type is mankind that has the mark, that have these possessed human bodies. Now, because our time is so short, we'll have to come back and talk on this again sometime, take it from this point onward. But all of these are put in the lake of fire at this point. Note verse 41. He'll say to them on his left hand, those are the goats, "Depart from me, ye cursed, in an everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels." So, all of the angels of the devil go into the lake of fire then. All of the men who have the mark of the beast, the goats who have never died physically, but have the mark. There's no resurrection here except for saints, Old Testament saints and tribulation martyrs. And now, turn back with me to the book of Isaiah, chapter 41. And then the book of Revelation, then we're done. I know you wanted a pablum eggnog tasting message on Christmas this morning, and here I'm giving you I'm glutton for punishment. But and verse number 9. This is talking about indirectly, prophetically, the judgment of Lucifer. Verse 9, "Hell from beneath is moved to meet thee at thy coming." Lucifer's, this is Isaiah 14:9. Note what it says. It stirs up the dead for thee. Where am I? Where were you? Excuse me, it is 14:9. I've got too many Rephaim, Nephilim. We're in Isaiah 14:9. I was imperfect twice, Nancy. You must be riding on a high horse there. "Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet you when you come." All right, now, it's speaking of Satan, or Lucifer, the devil, being cast into the lake of fire. Point is, he is greeted by people who are already there, or beings who are already in the lake of fire. And it says, "It stirs up the dead for thee." Question. Two Hebrew words. One is muth, translated dead, meaning physically dead, and one is Rephaim, the ones we're talking about. What word is this? Rephaim. It stirs up the Rephaim for you. guess what? You've got a grand greeting party ready for you when you come, because you're going to be there, and are they mad at you? The chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from off their thrones. Remember, they were the giants, men of renown, men who took over, and so forth. All the kings of the nations. Okay, so that's how we know that all of the ones that are spoken of here are in hell before Satan is cast into hell. They are placed in hell 1,000 years prior to this point. Okay, so let's go to Revelation 20. Revelation chapter 20. And note, verse number 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Verse 10. The devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. Guess what? If you go back to chapter 19, verse number 20, it says the beast and the false prophet were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. If our theory is right, that the Rephaim spirits were placed into men with the mark of the beast, and these men were physically alive, who has a couple of legions in them? The beast and the false prophet are demon possessed, and the whole shebang. The men with their guests are cast into the lake of fire. But the devil was cast in 1,000 years later. And so it says, it stirs up the Rephaim in the bodies of these men for the hatred there, because Lucifer is the one who got them in this mess to begin with. Now let's just quickly come back to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 28. Because there's another type body here now that we found in the lake of fire. Lucifer's body was a dense, weighty body. And that's reflected in the amount of glory that he had. He was the highest of the creative orders. He was the highest angel. He was an archangel. Now, the rest of these fallen angels were lower than he was. And remember, Abaddon, though he was an archangel, what happened to his body? He's type 2. He assumed a human body. So his archangel body is not there as such. He is in human form being burned. The Rephaim have no bodies, but they acquire the bodies of these other men. So we now have a very unique body in the lake of fire. The highest creative order, Lucifer himself. What does God say about him? Verse 12. You seal up the sum, full of wisdom. That was his inner genius. Perfect in beauty. That was his outer body. Every precious stone was your covering. The workmanship of the tabrets, last part of the verse, and the pipes was prepared in the day that you were created. You were beautiful, you could sing, you were bright both inside and out, and the like. But note what God said. Because of his body, he worshiped his body. It says in verse 18, you defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquity, the iniquity of your traffic. I will bring forth a fire from the midst of you, and it shall devour thee, and I will bring you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold you. He made the same type of promise to Lucifer that he would directly destroy his body in the lake of fire, though it was the best, most beautiful, brightest, densest, strongest of the creation at the time. So Lucifer is another type. Well, let's immediately go back to Revelation 20 and finish this up with two other types. Now, all of mankind who were not goats at the sheep and goat judgment. Now, Verse 11, I saw a great white throne, him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. There was found no place for them. I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. The books were open, and so forth. Judged every man according to their works. So here are just plain run-of-the-mill, normal human bodies, unglorified, unbelievers. They are resurrected. It's called the resurrection of the unjust, the resurrection unto condemnation, the resurrection of the damned, as it were. So there's the sixth type of body. Now, we still have one more type of body that's outstanding, that is different from all the rest, but will be reflected here in the last judgment of humanity. Whose would it be? The second category of Rephaim. Now, they're like mankind, but the reason that I added a seventh category here is because they still are different from mankind. They're still called Rephaim, they're still called Nephilim, which means that they are different from the norm as God created. But they go to hell in their bodies. Why? Because they did not lose their bodies. They have a resurrection. And the future resurrection is at the great white throne, where they will be cast into the lake of fire. But they will not be like the other category of Rephaim that loses a body and needs to possess a human body for their judgment. All right. We've come this far. I want to ask, are there any questions at this point? Because afterwards you have questions, and it's easier for me to illustrate it with my graphics than it is just to tell.